The New Orleans Pelicans lose a tough one to the Memphis Grizzlies in their season opener. And could there be a chance of LSU's head coach Jay Johnson leaving the program? We're talking about that and so much more today on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. All right, welcome everyone to another edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Appreciate you listening in. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit a follow button on Spotify. Leave us a review and also check us out and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. That way you do not miss a single episode of the program. And of course, it's a Thursday. We're getting that much closer to game day weekend with a lot of great contests on tap. Of course, LSU A&M is going to be one I think a lot of fans are going to be focused in on, and whether or not this could be the beginning of the end of the Brian Kelly era at LSU. But we need to kind of flip it over to the NBA to start this one off because, well, you had the season opener last night, and the Pelicans, they looked good. Not necessarily great, mainly because they had another poor third quarter. Like I don't know what it is, but they can start off pretty decent. They were up at half, but then somewhere along the line in the third quarter, they fall off a cliff. It's been that way for a hot minute. If you've been following this team for any amount of time, it feels like for some reason coming out the gates in the third quarter, I should say, they just don't have it. And again, losing by 6 stinks, especially to start the season, and considering like what happened in this game. It was impressive to see Zion Williamson out there for a significant period of time. He got things done. I was kind of surprised. Jose Alvarado did not see any time at all. It was a coach's decision to not play him in the contest. But we did see some positives, even in a 6-point loss to the Grizzlies. I think the biggest thing for me is, one, Zion Williamson was healthy and he was consistent. To 27 points, leading the way for the Pels. Had 9 boards, 5 assists and 5 steals, which is fantastic line for the start of the season. If he keeps that up, I think this Pelicans team can do some amazing things. But I think the other headline that we're going to be talking about is Jeremiah Fears has zero fear. He was out there getting and ones, going up against Defensive Player of the Year. This is going to be a fun team to watch. And again, it's only one game in, but I am a lot more interested in seeing what this team can do over the next couple of weeks, just to see how they look. Because again, one game does not a season make, especially when you have an 82-game schedule. I am very tentative on the hype for this team, and it's mainly because I'm not wanting to get hurt again by this team. I have gotten burned so many times back in my days working at my previous place of employment that I just don't necessarily feel like I can be tied to this team long term. I'm going to keep covering this team, giving you the idea and the lowdown about what's going on with them, as long as you're willing to have it. But at the end of the day, I just have to firmly believe that this Pelicans team has to prove a lot to me. Mainly, can Zion Williamson stay healthy? Number one. Number two, can the rest of the team stay healthy as well? Because I think if you lose Zion, you can rely on some other guys like Jeremiah Fears, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy. Those guys did pretty well themselves. With Herb Jones having 17 points, Jordan Poole looked really good as well. 30 minutes of playing time, 17 points, 2 assists, no boards, which was kind of surprising, but he maximized his time on the court. But I think Jeremiah Fears was the one that maximized his minutes, 2 assists and 17 points. Liked what I saw from him off the bench. And I would not be surprised if in the not too distant future he gets thrown into that starting 5 rotation, just because he's got that dog in him. And based off what we saw in game 1 against a pretty game Memphis Grizzlies team Ja Morant, they just could not stop to save their life. I mean, he was 34 points, 29 minutes of action, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal. Just, you're going to have to keep an eye on this guy. Also, shout out Jaren Jackson for the Grizzlies. 6 blocks on the game. Like, that is incredible stuff for the first game of the season. It feels like he was playing on rookie mode on NBA 2K. So hopefully this Pelicans team can get a little bit better on defense. If Jose Alvarado's ready to go, that could wind up making things a little bit easier for this Pelicans team to maybe get some wins on the board. Again, it's very early in the season. We're not going to count them out by any means. Just give it some time. And I feel like they could get that done and start bouncing back as the season progresses. They got San Antonio at home tomorrow night. Then they got Boston and Denver. It's going to be a very tough, first chunk of the season. But I think eventually you're going to start figuring it out. You're playing in the Western Conference, which has been and always will be a very difficult conference to play in. Stay healthy, and I think you'll eventually see the ball bounce your way. This is how I see things with this team. Intrigued to see what they do. One thing I am absolutely intrigued by has to be, without a doubt, what's going on at the Tennessee Volunteers baseball program. I understand it's October, but when you have a headline like this pop up and could have, I think emphasis is on the word could, it's very heavy, could there be a chance that with Tony Vitello taking the job with the San Francisco Giants, going from the MLB, going from the college ranks to the pros straight away, no minor league, no nothing. You were pretty much going to be dealing with the day-to-day operations as a manager of an MLB franchise that is kind of desperately needing to turn around, because this isn't the Giants team that was making the World Series every other year in the early to mid 2010s. Now, this is where I think a debate can be had. Is would, not could, because I think, everybody has a price, like Ted DiBiase used to say. But would Jay Johnson, if given the opportunity to have a conversation with the Tennessee Volunteers, leave the program at LSU where he's won 2 national championships? Would he leave for that job at Tennessee? In my opinion, I would probably say no. I understand there's probably a ton of money on the table for one Jay Johnson that I feel like a lot of guys would not pass up. That said, I just feel like Jay Johnson has a little bit more pride in what he does and is able to perform at a certain level. And I think he'd much rather stick with what he is doing right now and continue to build this program to be a consistent winner. And by consistent winner, I'm talking about not just trips to Omaha every single year, but winning the national championship at least every other year. Again, going back to that Giants allegory, I'd much rather, if I'm LSU, I'm starting to believe in the standard of LSU baseball being what it was back in the 90s and the 2000s with Skip Bertman leading the way. Like, I think after this national championship they won last year, or this past season, there's no doubt in my mind that now is the time for LSU baseball fans to start believing that they can make it to Omaha every single year. And they should start booking those trips now rather than waiting until after the SEC tournament. Now is the time to start booking trips to Omaha every single year based on what we've seen in the last 4 years with Jay Johnson at the helm. Again, winning a national title in the second year, great. Then doing it again in 2025 was icing on the cake for a program that has been needing to see that, because it had been a long time since we had seen LSU hoisting a national championship, adding another year to that infamous intimidator. So we're seeing something really refreshing with LSU baseball. And obviously, sometimes money is absolutely going to talk, but I think, at least in my heart of hearts, that Jay Johnson is not going to be swayed by money. Again, I can be completely off base with this. I understand money talks, and like Ted DiBiase said back in the day, everybody has a price. But I feel like the price isn't going to be right to get Jay Johnson to leave the certainty that he has of getting LSU to Omaha and winning national championships almost every year versus going over to Tennessee and potentially having to rebuild that program. I think if I were in his position, I'd stick with LSU. And that's not just because I like the franchise that LSU has. It's just because it's truly that program. It's one of the most well-regarded programs year in and year out, even towards the tail end of the Paul Mainieri era, where, it felt like the team just didn't have that chutzpah. People still respected LSU, and Alec Box Stadium is one of the big cathedrals in college baseball. That alone is enough to get you some top caliber, top flight recruits on the baseball front. I think that alone is enough to keep Jay Johnson away from considering the job over at the University of Tennessee, especially that news dropping in like mid-October. Like, that would be a massive blow to LSU to kind of have to hurry up. And it's going to be a massive blow for anybody that takes that job, because you losing a coach after fall ball and then you're having to kind of rebuild everything from the ground up, it's just not a great look if that happens. Does it happen with LSU's head coach? I don't necessarily think so. I could be completely wrong, but that's the way I see it. And speaking of coaching vacancies, this is one that could be available. I'm not saying it's going to be, but I feel like the footsteps are fast approaching one Brian Kelly, and he could be out of a job before the calendar flips over to 2026. And I'll say this because I think, and this is for a litany of reasons, but I feel like people are going to want to say John Sumrall, the head coach of Tulane, who has done a great job, he should be a top candidate for the LSU job, if it does indeed become available, like many are thinking it is going to. I disagree with that. Not because he's not qualified, because I think he's very qualified. It's mainly because LSU won't give him the shot. If this job becomes available, I think somebody else is going to snatch him up before the LSU brass get to him. That's just how I see it. Because look back in the time machine. LSU has always been a program that doesn't necessarily look within the state to get their next head coach. You go back to 2021. And again, I understand what happened with this head coach at the University of Florida. We're talking about Billy Napier, obviously. But, emphasis on but, he was one of those fresh new hotness coaches that I feel like a lot of people were thinking. I was at least thinking, why not give Billy Napier the shot to run this program? Because one of the things I've talked about a lot is when you go from one coach to the next, you usually go George Costanza. You choose the opposite route. Look at Ed Ogeron. He was big, rah, 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 He was just your down-home ball. Now, you go to Brian Kelly. Not necessarily Mr. Personality by any means. But you went for the more straight-laced, buttoned-up guy. That's the choice that you made. Is it paying off? Not necessarily. But we can see that they want to go oppo. And it's a lot of programs. I could bring up the Louisiana Raging Cajuns, going back to Billy Napier. You went from Coach Hud, who was super rah-rah, super high energy, and, pumping sunshine up your backside type of guy, to Billy Napier, who, again, is far from Mr. Personality. He could be entertaining if you kind of open him up a little bit, but he was the straight-laced, button-up guy coming from the Nick Saban School of Coaching, which is a great feather in the cap. I just don't think they go for John Sumrall if he's still available. And if this job does indeed become available, because that's the other billion-dollar question that we're having with the LSU job. We don't know if it's actually going to happen. At the end of the day, we don't know if this job's even going to become available by the time we get to even December. Now, I think LSU fans would love to see Brian Kelly get shown the door after Saturday if they lose to Texas A&M, which I feel like is becoming more and more of a possibility, especially if Whit Weeks isn't able to go. I just firmly believe, in my heart of hearts, John Sumrall seems like a great guy. Seems like he's going to have a very high-profile job waiting for him, and there are plenty of programs that are going to be knocking on the door for him. He'd probably be, in my mind, a second or third choice for a lot of programs. And I'm saying that because I think the first choice a lot of programs are going to be knocking on the door for is Lane Kiffin. Simply because he is the hot name that has had a consistent model of victory and showing that he can turn a program around very quickly. I mean, we're talking about Ole Miss potentially being a contender for a national championship right now. Same thing with Elko over at A&M. I feel like if the price is right, he's going to jump ship. It's money means everything. I keep kind of reaffirming that point because at the end of the day, all these guys are going to want to get paid the big bucks. This is where, the big debate is going to be with John Sumrall and Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin has been talked about a lot to be taking that Florida job. Does he want to deal with the Florida turnstile? Because I guarantee you, he has one bad season. Everybody's going to want him gone. You don't believe me? Go look at what's happened in the past with Dan Mullen, Billy Napier, even Jim McElwain. It is literally, you get 4 years and that's it. Is it justified what they do? No. But I still feel like if you are taking a job at Florida, you're taking your career in your own hands, especially if you don't perform well and be in contention to be in the playoff every single year. Because somehow Florida still has those delusions of grandeur of the Tim Tebow years. Tim Tebow's not walking through the door. Definitely not as a head coach. That said, I am going to be intrigued to see what happens with John Sumrall. I feel like he should have a job lined up for him. I just don't think if he becomes available, the LSU brass are going to take a guy from in-state. They're going to see that as and again, I'm emphasizing quote unquote a downgrade. I'm not saying it's a downgrade. If anything, I'd say it'd be an upgrade to get the fresh new hotness, get something different in there. But again, I'm not Scott Woodward, but he will have to get this one right, because if he doesn't, I feel like you could put the Jay Johnson stuff on the side. Kim Mulkey leading that women's basketball program. Those are great hires. But if you don't get the football one right, I think Scott Woodward, the clock may be ticking on him. But the clock is ticking on us here on this Thursday. We'll wrap up the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast today, and then tomorrow we'll be ready for a big old Football Friday, giving you a little preview of all the great matchups we've got on tap. We'll have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you mañana.